Mics are open. Hello. This week on Geek on My Sleeve, we will be doing a spoiler filled, yes, that is right, boys and girls, spoiler filled, run while you can, um, interpretation, reading thing. Uh,
Book discussion.
yeah, book discussion.
Did you say spoilers?
Yeah, spoilers.
Spoilers over Dungeon Lord, The Race Haunt, Book 1 by Hugo Huesca. Do you want to give the narrators a shout out too, Pete?
Silly me. I have too many tabs and didn't bring that tab up. It is now up.
Oh, you're good. I
So,
just know you're big fans
yeah,
of.
yeah, very, very much so. And ironically enough, sadly enough, we are currently competing with Sound Booth Theater Live. They are live, they are awesome. Please stay with us.
Yes.
If you want to see the narrators in action. I don't know who all is live at the moment, but Jeff Hayes does some of my other favorite lit RPGs, and Annie Ellicott does the whole female cast for this. It is a sound booth
Yes.
theater production. Yeah.
The sound effects too are just very impressive. Um, I
That's something they don't do a whole lot, but it is very good. You actually
mhm.
get that sound. Yeah, it's good. You get that sound distortion stuff.
Well, too, like with the spiders, like you said, they just have little bits here and there, but there's sound effects that add to it. With the spiders, you kind of hear the screechiness of their voice or whatnot in the background, like the crawling sound.
Yeah.
Um, there's a couple other moments that were a lot of fun in the action scenes, right? Very well done. You can do too much though.
Yeah, and yeah. Anyway, like intro stuff. Said the book. Said spoiler warning.
Did we say spoilers?
Yeah.
Okay, we got spoilers. If you guys didn't know, there's going to be spoilers. This is one of our favorites. I want to say it's one of the first lit RPGs we've picked up. Um, do you agree with that?
Yeah. It was one of our first ones. I think progression went ascend. Uh,
Ascend was early. I think first was maybe Divine Dungeon, and
okay. Yeah,
then
yeah.
the land, and there was already a whole lot out with the land. Um,
Which I would still probably put the land as my number one, but everybody already knows that. He already is smug enough that he counts himself as the grandfather of lit RPG.
the father of
Or
lit
father, I
RPG.
guess. He's not quite
Yeah.
grandfather yet.
Yeah. His series, though, The Land, in a lot of ways, we were talking about it earlier, just it fits the genre of lit RPG so well, right? It's hard to really nail down what is lit RPG. I don't know, maybe you could summarize it to me. What does lit RPG mean to you?
So, lit RPG is essentially someone being transported into a game world and or
Hmm.
their life being a lie and them being in a game world kind of deal. It
Uh-huh.
happens in several different ways. If anyone's seen Sword Art Online, there's a big VR MMO launch, which is virtual reality MMO launch, and then everybody gets trapped in the game. I consider that in the lit RPG, but it's a manga and an anime, not a book. And same thing with kind of I don't know. So this is where it's not 100% lit. It has our main character does Okay, so let's just talk about the beginning of the book. At the beginning of the book,
All right.
we have our main character killing a dungeon lord, Lord Kale, and we get to see it from both sides. So, from Lord Kale, you very much feel it is a real world. From Edward and our party, you very much feel like it is a game. And then
Mm-hmm.
learn that Ivalice is actually a world, and due to their magic, they're able to bring in humanoid type characters that then people in our world as we know it, or Edward's real world, can interact via, proxy or whatnot, avatar, however you want to say it, and
Mm-hmm.
interact in that world. But on our side, it just seems like a computer. On their side, it's all done by magic, and it really messes with like, or well, it utilize. I can't.
I was about to say, be careful. We typically try to keep spoilers all the way up until the book we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And we're at book four, big fans of the series, and you learn a lot more about the world. But yeah, that's a great summarization of how this is quote unquote lit RPG because um, it's a video game world, supposedly, right? When Haran, the boatman, is talking to him, he explains that the publishers, developers have an office and nobody's there.
Yeah.
Um, so I we've talked about it in previous streams. Books really need to capture your attention in the first chapter, right? And a lot of lit RPGs do a good job just like jumping into action. And in my opinion, that's what captured me with Dungeon Lord. The title says Dungeon Lord. You open up at the beginning of the book with Dungeon Lord, and you get to see just like all the epicness and then tie it into an MMO, which is something all gamers, a lot of people who read in this space are gamers can relate to,
Well, not
right?
only that, like it ties in the real world pretty well. Because
Mm-hmm.
I guess we'll try to go chronological for a little bit. Start off, and he's with his party taking out Dungeon Lord Kale, and then you've got
Mm-hmm.
them over Discord, which is a very common thing because a lot of games don't implement voice, and everybody has their own voice thing they like regardless. Um, and we get to see a couple of the creatures and the things in the world, which then we meet later. And then,
Mm-hmm.
through the scenario, we get people's different personalities and whatnot. And the boss goes and pretty much gets himself killed. And the um, Ed, the worker or drone, whatever, of Laser Shark ends up disobeying
Yep.
orders because he should be the group leader, but the other guy thinks he's a group leader. Anyway, so
Ryan Silverblade the third or whatnot.
yeah, yeah, and he goes and he gets himself killed, and then they win, whatever. And then we go to the real world, and we get to see that. Oh man, like I just had so much fun playing this game. I wanted to make sure we didn't wipe. I wanted to make sure it was meaningful for, we're getting less and less time to play games, which that hit home for me because that's why I enjoy these
Mm-hmm.
lit RPGs, to live
Right.
vicariously through the lit world where, yeah,
You don't have time to spend 40 hours a week grinding out your dailies
exactly.
as you get ready to go back to work after shut down for so long. The world is opening up. Does that mean we're leaving the game? Um, what was that rant you did during the stay at home tag video talking about stuck
Oh,
in
yeah,
lit
yeah, yeah,
RPG?
yeah. For this current pandemic and the shelter in place, everybody, well, for me, I'm already a introvert and I could deal with people less and be fine. But I, just took it as I'm trapped in the game. I can't go out, whatever. I just get it imported via
Yep.
Amazon, and yeah, I have to venture out. So my session's coming to an end, and I will have to venture out and re-enter the workforce here shortly.
Gotta pay rent on, what do they call it in Ascend Online? The extended,
Pod fees
systems
or
where
whatnot.
yeah, yeah, where you pretty much stay in it, what is it, 13 days on, 1 day off? Something
I want
like
to say it was
that?
a nice number, like 10,
Okay.
but I'm not 100%.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Time to go back out into the real world.
yeah, time dilation things. Um, but yeah, and then you just get to see those raw emotions of someone getting fed up and just bashing his face in, and just the manipulation there. And then you get to see you get an insight into the eerie magic where right after it all happens, he's kind of aloof, I'll say, where he knows things are happening around him, but he's not like really focusing on them. And then, the they start driving off, and he's like, "Hey, aren't you going to wait for your partner?" And he's like, "Oh, we came in a separate vehicle." And yeah, there's just that kind of disconnect due to, in my mind, the eerie powers of the other world and Haran coming into play.
Chapter 3 is Enter the Boatman.
Okay.
So everything up to this point is just the first 3 chapters, and when we talk about other books, one of the big things we really look for is the world building, right? I have some thoughts on it, thinking the fact that you get a glimpse in the intro of the world of the dungeon lord life, of this epic dungeon lord, the monsters, the minions. You go into chapter 2 where you get a glimpse of the real world, right? Where he's just a peon. You get to see a little bit of insight into his actual life, quote unquote, right? Graduated with a CS degree, now working as a minion at the equivalent to Geek Squad in the real world. You talk about when his boss, who just got permadeath the night before, has a tantrum and tells him to go fire his friend Lisa or whatever for pretty much not healing the boss on game night, right? And he just loses it. And then we go to chapter 3, and with the boatmen, we really get kind of like a glimpse into the higher powers of this game, right? The deities, the powers, the magic system, a little tease of objectivity. And then we talked about it, and I think are spoiler free
Yeah, for the
of this one.
Faust. Or
Yeah, where he talks about, yeah, I think you're right, the Faust play, where, yeah, he's pretty much making a deal with the devil, but the devil's not going to do anything to, um, warp him or corrupt him or force him to do anything. He believes that temptation itself will draw him to, quote unquote, serve the dark.
And for me, it really felt like a Spider-Man paradox, where Spider-Man is always like, with great power comes great responsibility. And then with this, it's
Yes.
like, so, your life's kind of screwed anyway. I can give you all this awesome power, and,
Uh,
you're going to do my bidding anyway. With this power, you're going to further the dark or the corrupt goals.
tough call, right?
Yeah,
Do I go to
well,
jail or do I become a dungeon lord? Mm,
yeah, it's
and
very pressured, but at the same time, like throughout the rest of his life scenarios, he would have picked it regardless. Like even if the alternative was going to jail, I think he really would have, because that's one of
who
his
wouldn't?
biggest beefs with his Ryan, is Ryan just got handed it because of dad's company, where he has the actual degree. He's worked at higher end jobs prior due to whatever it's not available or he doesn't have those at the time. And he wants to, prove it to himself and to Ryan that you can have power and not be a complete buffoon about it.
Yes.
So, kind of
Yes.
the character moral compass that we typically talk about.
Mhm. And, uh, using that logic, talking to the boatman about it, saying that essentially, like you said, he felt like his life was stagnant, where he wasn't going anywhere, and here was an opportunity with power to go build something and do something with his life. And he pretty much said, "Yeah, go ahead and run off to the light. Go rush off and serve the light." And it kind of talks about that binariness of the situation, like it's not just good and evil. And I think we get to see a lot of that through this story. That's something that Edward really challenges himself. He's like, I'm going to go serve the light. I'm going to do what's right.
Oh, I just
Um,
looked at something random online. It was like angels, demons, and lizards. And
hmm,
apparently, it's a story trope where you have the good guys, the angels, the bad guys, the demons, and the lettuce or the stuff in between, which are the lizards that take both and use them to their own ends while swimming. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
I am neither Jedi nor Sith. I think they call it like a gray Jedi. Like there's balance in the Force.
but
Uh,
anyway, that's we're at Haram. We're at the boatman transporting him.
mhm.
There's a lot of feels. There's a lot of
Answer how you feel about the world building. We went down the side tangent.
okay. So
How do you feel this
on
book
the
does?
world building, it doesn't do amazing because it's
Really?
all teasers. So there's two
That's the best kind,
differences
though.
to the world building. For me, if you went and I guess we'll say Divine Dungeon because we've covered it and it's not too much of a
Mm,
spoiler. They do really well. You're in the world, you're experiencing it, you get it from this side, you get it from that side. It's not really a time hop, but then it replays a scene from the other side and it's
okay.
like in the world. For this one, there was a big teaser lead in at the very beginning with the Lord Kale fight, and you get to see the Caftars, and you get to see, Lord Kale, and you get to see the heroes, and you get all of that. But then it goes to the real world, which is, blase, whatever. I don't care about you. But we get to smash some faces, and we get a little bit out of that. And then we get to see the transport or the space in between, and that
Mhm.
was a big tease or that was insightful. But then after that, when we're actually in the world, eh, maybe it's just because of how long the book was, but for first book, I felt like it was
It's a
more of
short
a
book.
character moral compass developing thing. And that's why that quote from Faust and the boatman really kind of personifies this book for me. And
Mhm.
so yeah, yeah. And as far as the whole series for four, amazing world building. As far as book one, I felt it just gave me a taste. It was a hook, it was a teaser, but it wasn't developmental.
So, I agree with almost everything you just said, and I think that's why it made it great for world building in the first book, right? Because the first book, you're really
Oh,
trying to hook
okay,
them.
in
And
balance.
while you would appreciate stopping and smelling the roses and getting all the details, some people can just get lost, right?
True.
That's where all the action packedness comes in. And it gives you enough of a glimpse to set it up. And at least for me, um, the book was unique enough in how it was executed. I really enjoyed it, but the magic system immediately I recognized it borrowed heavily from D&D, and we talked a little bit about that.
Okay, I guess
So,
that is true. That's something. I don't know if we released the content where our other brother Paul mentioned he thought the world building was great because the author sets up rules for himself or parameters
mhm.
for how things work and he sticks to it. So I guess in that regards and the magic system and objectivity and the good and the light and the dark. Yeah.
I think with the first book, and I feel again, we've talked up to about chapter 3 or 4 at this point. A big part for me is like the immersion in the world, right? Give me enough pieces to this world that you want me to come and play in. That way I can play that video in my mind, right? And I felt like he did a really good job at this point with the world building, getting us to this point, throwing him into the forest to meet Levi and Alder and the Batlins. Um,
Or sorry, side note, man, I just cracked up when after Edward gets his heart ripped out and there's the little song going on and it's about the Lord of the Dark who is only between heartbeats and you got like the little chippy Oompa Loompa gnome guys in my head singing like I was just like what is even
the
happening
audio
right here?
book, yeah, the audio book does it so well too because they do sing and you could just kind of picture it in your mind, right?
Yeah, so that was a great part for me. I yeah. Anyway, sorry. So we're painting the picture. He's now in the other world. We get the Zelda quote. It's dangerous to
Uh,
go alone. Take this.
I was waiting for you to bring it up. I got a little chuckle out of that. It's amazing how many video game Easter eggs you find in lit RPG genres. If you consider yourself a gamer, you pick up a handful. Sorry, so we get the level up on the heart, um, his walking stick of Alder. It's dangerous to go there alone. Here, take this.
And I guess another thing I really appreciate is it's an origin. Like he was a high level, BA hero, but that's not how he got transported A. And then B, it's similar yet different and that was something that the boatman talks to him about how um Ivalice was there first and your
Mm-hmm.
game mechanics are based off of Ivalice, so that was kind of
Mm-hmm.
cool. I forgot the rest of the train of thought here. Oh yeah, he starts off as a level 1 nobody.
Yeah. Started from the bottom, like the lowest of the low, right? And yeah, he doesn't even have a shirt. He only has a stick. Um,
Breaks it on the first swing, just starts
yeah,
screaming, charges out. It's the
the
Batlin.
Batlins. Oh man, talk about MVPs for the book. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the Batlin. Oh, brain fart begins
Or
with a
collect.
C. Kleck. Yes, he is just so awesome. Like the way they describe them, the Batlins are just, like little what rat creatures or whatnot. And he just he's the MVP with the final battle always being there for Edward. Um, just a little ray of sunshine in this dark, dark epic fantasy story
Yeah,
slash
which
lit RPG.
so there's a couple good one-liners and kind of like during the first fight where I don't know, he's thinking something, then he kind of tells himself like, "Dang, that was a long outro or that was a long whatever." Normally it's just something like, "Oh shit," or "I think I can take him," or whatnot, and then he
Yes.
ends up, in the middle of the Batlins, and he's like, "I think I can take him," and he just feels so much better after getting that set up. And then same thing with Kleck towards the end. when he after he's like, everybody always forgets about me, and he's like laying on the ground. And he's like, I got so many experience points.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, and then
Oh,
that's where the lit RPG feel really, it, for as much as it isn't, it is because yeah, that's definitely what happens. You know, you're in the moment, you're going through the fight scene, and then you get the feels after.
it has the video game components to it. It's not nearly as heavy as a lot of them are. A lot of them, they'll just like stat dump you nonstop. And when I'm in the mood for it, yeah. Um,
Well, but that's
but
where you get, and that's we talked about it. It's the D&D vibe because for
mhm,
several engagements, it's not flat stats, you know, and that's where very much in D&D esque you roll the dice and it's a chance and
yes,
get to see that here
objectivity.
and how objectivity works. I guess a good example is his improved reflexes. It's not like it's not like a spell slot, which in
Hmm.
D&D you only get so many daily uses and you got to reset them, and it you can utilize it, but it's all a matter of feel, which in my mind is
Yeah.
how well you roll the dice, how well rested you are, the other, stats and things. So it did well there.
Yeah, the other factors, in a lot of ways, again, in D&D, uh, there's how you approach the situation, right? There were several times where his wit, his intelligence, not to get out ahead of ourselves, but several conflicts, it wasn't because he just had the raw better
Yeah.
stats, right? He was able to kind of use his resources, the fireballs and the spells well to kind of get away.
Yeah, and you get
Um,
to there was a line in the very beginning fight. Sorry, we're going backwards with Lord Kale where he's engaging someone, or no, he's engaging the tank of the party. Ryan has already died, and then he switches aggro over to Edward, and it's just like a random side note. It's like, oh, and due to him changing targets, he's got a something penalty.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so now he's got his two minions. We've got,
Three.
or yeah, yeah, okay, three. He
Everybody
does get
forgets about
Kleck.
Kleck.
Yep. Um, let's see. He goes and they go back into the cave. He's like, well, have you known a dungeon lord who can't utilize their powers? Ends up using his evil eye and seeing
Hmm.
the ley lines or whatever of power. Creates the drones, recreates his own seat. Mm, then we get a little bit of
Spiders.
the transmute property stuff, which I really enjoy. It's kind of cool. Yeah. Anyway, so then the spiders, everybody's just freaking out. Spiders are coming out of nowhere. He pulls the dust trap explosion thing, and there's another book that speaks highly of stuff like this, where it's not about your power; it's about your application of power. And
Yes.
so, yeah, that's not this, but that's what that makes me think of.
Yeah, and we get to see a bit of the magic system there. Um, but bringing it back to that point, it's because he understands how this all works. And there's a couple moments where that gets the better of him. The scene where he just goes off and talks about how, like, once he starts understanding the powers, how he could become the IKEA of
Oh,
the
yeah, of the world.
Ivalice or whatnot. All the other dungeon lords are crazy. Why not just set up shop and run everyone else out of business, building furniture and trinkets with his little laser shark drones? And then the water filtration empire as they're trying to go through and
Or
figure out how to
that's
purify the
not.
water.
Yeah, that's a little later, but yeah, that was. Oh man, that was too much. Um, so we
Uh,
defeated the spiders. We're now trying to go to the town. We're getting a little bit of lore backstory for the world, and they're going to try to pass off Edward as a undercity cutthroat. Um, it you know it all kind of works out. He does end up utilizing a advanced reflexes just for a conversational piece to kind of collect his thoughts. Uh,
I was about to say, I don't think it's technically the first time he uses it because he uses it with the
yeah,
spiders,
yeah.
but one of the first time he uses it is just to come up with his backstory literally right when he's getting asked. I mean, talk about poor planning. So he has to use his ability.
And so he ends up saying he's an adventurer. Then we get the second purchase of power where uh, they need food. Alder is like, hey, I know someone who's been literally cooking the same pot for years, and he buys resist something, resist
Resist
disease.
disease or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we get that little side tangent where I it would have been cheating, but he talks about how he doesn't have the or immunity, those white blood cell thingies that do stuff to save your life. He doesn't have the response to all the diseases in their world. It would be cheating if
Hmm.
they all got the flu from him and they didn't have the response. Anyway, little
And
humor
he gets
side
all the
note.
X, yeah, get all the XP. Bio warfare.
And
Um,
then yeah, so he purchases that. We finally meet or no, I guess we've already met Ranger, Ione, and Galio because the night before they're on the wall and they're saying, "Hey, do we think are they out there?" The firelight
yeah.
destroys my night vision, and they confirm or they talk about how they are out there, and
Hmm.
anyway. So we're now with our party walking through the town, getting to see the marketplace, and we meet
It
Ranger Ione. Or go on.
quick thought. It's something we've talked about in the past. It's Dungeon Lord as a title. So I initially thought it was going to be a lot more dungeon building in this first book. And the reality is you get that little bit with the cave, and then you get the little bit at the end, but the rest of it right here, again, like a D&D party going to fight off some quote unquote low level spiders, low level compared to his character before uh, he came into the world as a scrub, right? I think at one point he talks about like batlins and spiders. He would just kill for a little bit of XP on his way in between big areas or dungeons. And I really like how they explained the XP system and the fact that if it's too easy for you, you're not going to get it, right? The objectivity kind of plays into the amount of danger you're in. So you still have to work at it and you still have to challenge yourself. And we get to
Yeah,
see some of those components in the later books as well.
another book that does that well, or for me, kind of explained it better, was The Ritualist,
I was just thinking
because
about that.
there are scenes in their party, and not to dive too much into it, more to explain, it talks about how a party member kills something,
Hmm.
the other party member doesn't get any XP, and then the third one, the leader says, "Hey, you didn't think of yourself in combat. You didn't think of yourself as engaged in this
Yes.
scenario, and
Yes.
because of that, you didn't get the XP." Switching back to Dungeon Lord, it's not so much that, it's more, I guess, practical applications. And the best example, oh, I think it's Levy is talking to Edward, and Edward is just like, "What? I get X amount of XP for crushing them with a rock, but I only get X amount of XP for exploding them with a dust thing."
Yeah.
And yeah, she explains on that, or kind of same thing when he's like, "Oh, it's weird how it took me X amount of years to get 100 XP, but I've doubled in experience
Hmm.
since." And she just looks at him and she's like, "Well, did you ever battle, human-sized spiders in your other world?" Like, no, no, I guess I did.
It's a good point though. And if you think about the average Joe, how often are they really putting themselves up against giant-sized spiders or, other incredible feats,
Yeah,
and then go
physical
to the game world.
prowess in the world today is
Mhm.
virtually non-existent, is only existent virtually. Oh, put
Oh,
that around there.
oh, what a loop, what a loop.
Um,
As we're all trapped inside our extended, virtual reality capsules. Back on point. Uh, we had a point?
yeah, yeah, we were just
Oh.
meeting Ranger Ione and
Oh,
Galio,
yes.
the
Yes.
ex-Inquisitor who is now sheriff of our rinky-dink outside the world town.
There was some fun banter there, and we talked about it in the spoiler free, but we should probably warn everyone else as well that this is a more mature book. Would you agree? As
Yeah,
far as the
I
dialogue, as far as the graphics.
it is a more so mature book.
Mm,
There are blood, guts, and gore, which is pretty typical. It's kind of dark fantasy esque. There is a romance scene, not a subplot,
yes.
not a. It doesn't go anywhere, which is fine, but it is very much a yeah, 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 yeah. Anyway, so it's a bit more mature. It's a bit dark. I had a lot of humorous moments about it. A lot of the scenes just kind of made it more relatable, so it was
It also
enjoyable for
made
me.
it more real in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like how
And
people would react.
how people would react, it's the main character is a 25-year-old, who is thrown into another world, fighting, slaying, trying to survive, and we're going up against spiders and the Mind Brood, which, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there are several scenes with the Mind Brood as it's just killing,
Oh yeah,
feeding.
that's
Um, the scene there with the dad.
yeah. That is quite a emotional moment because you get the view of this little girl who having her brain eaten and replaced with this monster and both urges and stuff going on, and the whole
Mhm.
time she's just like trying to explain herself from the girl's perspective. Meanwhile she's now jumped and just obliterating and ripping apart her father. And yeah, it's just, and so I didn't appreciate it my first read through, but and the author doesn't do as well of a job as like telling you, which I kind of appreciate. Um, but we get to see as we're walking through before we get to Galileo and them, there is a wife who is talking to the guard about chickens, and he overhears, and then Levy's like, "Oh, we need to keep going, or we're going to get caught up in a epic chicken quest or whatnot." And
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me,
I
my
got a good
brain
chuckle at that.
goes to back to Zelda, and if you touch the chickens, you're gonna die. And I'm like, why didn't they all die? Anyway,
Uh,
side note, tangent. But then that wraps into the mind brood into the little girl who we get to see little bits of, and then it also
mhm.
wraps into the mind brood little girl killing the father. And like it was something so simple as, hey, you know my chickens are dead, what are you going to do about it? And he's pretty much like, hey, your husband's a drunkard. It was a fox, I'm sure when you find it you'll deal with it, whatever, whatever. But then it's actually this much worse.
Yes, little baby slug, mind brood, eating away at this little girl's brain, taking over her body, thinking as this little girl. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it's overkill. I think it really just plays into how it's dark fantasy and the gruesomeness of it all, right? It's war, it's fighting. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
think it's done very well, and it's not overwhelming, and it is very descriptive and relevant
Hmm.
at times.
Hmm.
And yet again, just it's that is where the world building is good, you know. So
Yeah.
so anyway, we finally we got there and we're meeting Galileo and they get that whole back and forth. I'm a undercity cutthroat. You're,
Mhm.
an ex-inquisitor. We shouldn't be talking. We don't care about each other. And then we get a little bit of the mature humor about the pole
Yes.
lance and pleasure stroll.
Yes.
Not gonna do that on here. But
Uh,
yeah, and then we also get to meet Kessa of Green.
we pretty much get all our main characters for the most part introduced at this point,
Yeah,
which is part of the reason why we can the book is just so short. Like a lot of the world building, we get some of those quick glimpses. The characters, we get them in 2, 3 batches at most. Um, yeah, we get to meet, like you said, the ex-Inquisitor Galileo, who ends up becoming this major figure, and it really talks to like the overall, um,
light and dark.
yeah, one of the major themes of this book, like good and evil, light and dark. They talk about serving the light and serving the dark, yet you have Edward who's trying to do good while quote unquote serving the dark. And in a lot of ways, like one of the big things with the mind brood is the light, the light gods, the people who serve them. If there's any
Well,
chance of
so
infection,
that
they're
was
going to purge everyone.
that was one of the weirdest things for me. So we've got Edward, who thinks he can Faustify this dungeon lord mantle. So
Uh
he's
huh.
a dark entity that is trying to be a neutral or good entity. And then we have
Hmm.
Galileo on the other side, who was an inquisitor who is on the light side, who has then been lost favor and now is in the neutral position as just caring for basic human beings and life. And then we have the mind brood, which is, I guess I'm on the side, the mind brood, of which is a neutral entity, but was utilized and facilitated through a dungeon lord to push the dark path, but then is a neutral entity of which is just a trying to survive.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And yeah, so it's weird because I dislike a couple other series that have set in stone a light and a dark mentality. This doesn't do that, and I appreciate it, but you can never tell where what stands. And
There's lawful good, there's,
yeah, it's very D&D esque where
neutral, there's chaotic good. And like what Galileo at the end, he
it's back in the
pledges
grays.
himself to the god. He is so lawful good, right? Just like we'll get into it in the end, the final decision, the climax. Yet, yeah, so we're going out to slay some spiders,
Yep.
right? We meet everybody. It's a pretty interesting D&D group going on our first encounter by the sheriff slash inquisitor. Um, and just the whole, I really enjoy all the fight scenes. I'm not sure about you, how you feel in the grand scheme of things, but they're just done so well.
Yeah. I enjoyed the fight scenes. You know me, I could have always used more, but what impressed me or what I enjoyed instead of so much action, it was the application of power. It was not
Hmm.
exact. You know, a lot of lit RPGs, it's like, okay, you've got a cooldown. Okay, now you can reuse it. Okay, I'm
Hmm.
focusing more on the health stats and I'm focusing more on my armor stats and the magic and blah. But for this, it was more natural esque, like real world esque, with
Hmm.
some power. I don't know. It was a very D&D feel. I enjoyed the application of power, and yeah,
The strategy behind it, right? It's not just, okay, we're going to go charging through and hack and slash and pure raw numbers. It was, okay, we got to bunch these guys up for this AoE damage to do the most effect, right? So Edward, new scrub to the world, goes charging in using his sword as a club to try to fight with some spiders and group them up for the fireballs. And just the, oh my goodness.
Well, yeah, and that was another good one because we get to see that in the very beginning where Ryan jumped into the middle and Edward's
Uh,
just like, well, you ruined the whole plan. What are you doing? You know, we have our
yes,
tank for holding the
yes.
line to save our casters, and then you're supposed to get your backstab damage off for being a rogue. Anyway, so now we're at the
The
spider scene.
roles are very simple and straightforward. There's a few couple rules when you go dungeon crawling slash raiding. Don't stand in the stuff. Don't draw aggro. Let the tank pull. Tank do its job. Stay in range of heals. I
But that's
mean,
where this kind of breaks that. You know, as much as it's a D&D esque, we kind of get that uneasy vibe from Edward from the get go when they're talking about the spiders. And, you know, he just plays through the scenario in his own head. Well, this is what I would do. I would just have the
right.
spiders drop from the trees and surround them, and, you know, enough little bites is good enough, and then do this. And then, anyway, he lays out the whole scene beautifully as he would do it.
Yes.
Not going to say more, but he ends up, you know,
Oh, the potential for our young dungeon lord.
uh,
He's a scrub right now. Where's he going to be in a couple
or
good
well, I
books,
guess
Pete?
that's not a spoiler because he does get the queen as a minion at the end.
It's true. It
But
is very true.
hey, thank you, Liff. Man, so there are so many emotes and things are weird because everybody has their own platform and some people can see other people's platforms and some people cannot. And it's weird. Anyway,
So, what platforms does he go into in this virtual world that he gets to utilize? There's objectivity
that's
and
the main one he messes with.
yeah, um, the powers
Or
of light versus dark, good and evil. Um, yeah, and
drink more
then he
water.
gets he they get through that conflict, and that's when we learn about the mind brood, right? And the first bit of foreshadowing for who it could be.
Yeah, we end up completely destroying Edward's ideal of grandeur and becoming an adventurer. And he
Hmm.
just wants to, you know, kind of get back in his rut. And he's like, well, why don't we pretend we're adventurers, become well known, make some money, and then go do this other stuff. And
Yeah.
our very first fight, our very first conflict, the Spider Queen is like, hey, I smell it. Hey, there's a dungeon lord among you. I'm going to devour your souls now. Um,
Galileo,'s a good guy. He tries to help out, give Edward an out, but yeah, his hand kind of gets forced, and then you have that big conflict, and he gets Kessa of Green as a minion. Like, heck yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, it, tune in next time. Um,
Don't want to get too far
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. There. So one of the Edward is still trying to play the good side. He's still trying to wait until Galileo is free because he's currently caught up in webs because he
Hmm.
saved Edward.
Hmm.
And so he's stalling and talking to the queen, the Spider Queen. Ends up, you know, everybody forgets about Kleck. Kleck is MVPing over here, collects the fireball
He really
runes.
is
I mean, there's something about being average Joe or being Joe Forget 'em.
the underdog. Yeah.
And anyway, so Kleck grabs the runes. So we don't win our first engagement, which is refreshing. We don't
It is
come
so
out
refreshing.
unscathed, and it does push the main story along due to how everything happened, due to people needing to flee for their lives, and the moral compass of Essa of Green wanting to save her friend.
Yes.
So, and due to the moral compass of our main guy, Edward, wanting to be the good guy, he wants to save her as well. He's stalling for time to make sure Galileo gets free. Galileo's got to peace out
Mhm.
because he doesn't want to die. Kleck's now,
Mhm.
putting his fears aside, not really grabbing the fireball runes. And just yeah, the way it all comes together is beautiful. Kessa Green has uh, the pack, dot your T's, cross your I's, verbiage that is binding, words.
Dungeon
Yeah,
Pact?
yeah, I guess I said a dungeon pact.
Okay.
Anyway, so she has a dungeon pact and pretty much says, "Hey, this person can't set inside your dungeon." And at the time, we're like, "WTF? Okay, yeah, sure, whatever." Anyway, so we manipulate the powers that Edwards used to get the drones to drive him back home, or he uses his straight line Google Maps drone
Uh,
implementation, and he's able to find home, which then we learn later more about Kessa of Green and the whole dungeon pact bit. And yet
mhm.
again, because we're all, the light side, the dark side, but we're really in the middle, and just everybody's moral compass and how Kessa's really, could have been light, but she's something completely different. You'll find out more. Um, Yeah, yeah. It ties a lot of factors all together, and that's why I wasn't sad that there wasn't more combat. The combat
Mhm.
is good for its graphics, for its detail, but it's kind of short. But the whole time it's doing combat, it's progressing the storyline, it's adding extra characters and elements and plots and everything else. Because, like, from that first engagement, or I guess it's not really first engagement, but from our party, anyway, first engagement, there are so many things that develop about it. We get to, yeah,
I would argue that most of this book is combat to some degree or another. It's not all combat, but if you look back, there's almost at least a combat scene in almost every one of the first couple
okay,
chapters,
I guess
right?
that's pretty true. Because we go
It's
from
not overextended, but we get more aspects of the magic system, more aspects of the combat, how the laws of the universe work. Um,
Maybe it was just the feel of it, the way it was progressing the story for the Mind Brood, and the way it was kind of
mm,
dialing in our moral compass. And maybe I was more conflicted with the uh, angels, demons, and lizards.
they do spend a good amount of time in between where you get some of that sprinkled in time around the campfire, the social interactions between Edward and Levi and Alder, so on and so forth. But there's almost always an action scene in at least every other chapter, though it might be small.
Okay, so yeah, it was
And then
fairly
there's a
action packed.
couple big ones as well. The big in my mind, okay, so maybe three big ones. And if you look at the story arc, you have the intro, then you have in the middle with the spiders, and then you have at the end with the mind brood,
Yeah,
right? And then other minor conflicts in between. And
yeah, like the first Batlin conflict, and then the first Spider conflict, and
mhm, mhm.
the
I was
Mind
even counting the
Brew.
Battling as the beginning. I was counting Dungeon
Or no, no,
Kale
no. You
or
you
Dungeon
hit
Lord, yeah.
on main battles. I was
Mm.
hitting on
Oh,
sub
okay.
battles.
Oh, gotcha.
And
Yeah.
then like the
Yeah.
mind brood girl eating the chicken, and the mind brood
Her
girl, the
father.
father, and yeah.
Mhm. And then the minor conflict with the spiders in the beginning as well. And then trying to think, there was even an almost skirmish with well, the whole My Brood conflict is full of little mini fights as well. Sorry, getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
We
but real quick, I guess something we glanced over. So the little girl is trying to see the adventurers leave the town, and
Mhm.
well done. Well done, sir. The way you added those random scratch noises, like
Yes,
it implied things, but it didn't
yes.
give you anything. And then the way it ties everything together, because like I'm like, okay, let's get to the action. And we're getting to the action, but then we're stopping and having our evil monologue, not really with the Spider Queen, but then we figure out more from Kessa of Green about being a pacted dungeon minion, whatever. And then
And the Mind
yeah,
Brood.
and also throughout all that, there's a lot of things that like I overlooked my first read through, kind of like how Ranger Ione has that moment with Galio where they're looking out over the palisade and they're like, hey, are they out there? Yeah, they're out there. And he's, has this like impulse to push Galio off the edge, and he's, envisioning him falling and dying, but then he ends up patting him on the back and whatnot, but then turns out that he's really the bad guy.
The foreshadowing was done
Yeah,
well. It wasn't too over the top, but if you go back and reread it, there are a lot of details that kind of help lead you along. And then when you get those key pieces about the Mind Brood and just the implications there, it really just all comes into focus, and you're like, oh snap.
yeah, yeah. The foreshadowing was done well, and please, for the love of all that is good, angels, demons, and lizards in the world, continue the series.
It's really good. It gets better. The scaling is just incredible each book, which I can appreciate. The first book, you really don't have any major time hops, right? Because it's just one thing after
Yeah,
another
it's
thing
smashed
after
together.
another thing. Yeah, we get minions, we get a nice little start to our dungeon core group, and while we're trying to figure things out with the Inquisitor about the Mind Brood and pacting and that, part of the reason why he earns Kessa's loyalty is because she realizes that he's not the evil that everyone just assumes dungeon lords are. He actually wants to do good. He's just quote unquote manipulated by the dark, and it makes a lot of those arguments throughout the story. Like, uh, isn't everybody just manipulated by somebody, or
Yeah, yeah.
who's pulling the strings for who?
And that's where
Good, dark.
my rant prior about people being one thing, but then coming through as something else, like, we're all playing with broken toys at this moment. Like, Edward is broken from another world. Levi was born in a dungeon, is broken. Alder is apparently in the wrong freaking continent and shouldn't even be here. Kessa, and I'm trying to think what all they actually explain in this one. Anyway, Kessa's broken. uh, we get a little bit of insight where he's like, based off of her stats or whatever, she should have more talents, whatever, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Are you saying it's essentially just the land of misfit toys coming together to control their own dungeon?
Well, I'm saying that the way it paints out initially that they're good or that they're evil,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of like me, and I went on a rant, and I don't know if we shared it, where I don't think we did. Anyway, I was playing Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, and
Mm.
I was so happy that my first Chow was freaking evolving, and it came out neutral. And I was so like WTF kind of moment. Like, I wanted to unlock either the heaven or the dark
Yep,
new
yep,
expansion, and it came
yep.
out neutral. And I was so
Uh,
upset, but
you kept flipping on the storyline.
it's kind of like how the story felt for me. Like, Edward now has the Dungeon Lord heart. Galio has been forsaken by the light.
Yes.
Tune in next time for Kessa of Green. Levy
Uh,
is, yeah. So we're all broken toys, and yeah. Anyway, so sorry,
and
we got off on a side tangent. We survived the spider excursion. We know that Edward is the dungeon lord. We know our Galio escapes. We save Kessa's friend. Then we're having, or Kessa runs off. Or well, actually, Levy and Alter don't use this straight line. They actually have their avoid
minor
tolls.
minor details.
Okay.
Tell me about what we learned about the dungeon pact and Kess and him meeting up with Galio.
Or oh, okay.
All that,
After okay. So
yeah, all
Kessa
that other
Kessa of
stuff's filler.
Green goes out. Levy and Alder are raging. Edward's like, WTF happened? Anyway, they go out to meet with Ranger Ione and Galio, and it turns out that anyone who packs with a dungeon lord, due to what they refer to as the Mind Brood, it's oh words
What are you looking for?
or
Objectivity.
no, what they the dungeon lord who infected people with the Mind Brood
Oh, something Bane.
is gonna
Oh,
bug me. Anyway, so there's a dungeon lord.
Sapphire's Bane.
Yeah, Sapphire's Bane, and that's why we understand the dungeon pack thing. Anyone who packs with a dungeon lord is essentially dead to the world, is going to be killed on sight because of Sapphire's Bane, where Sapphire was a dungeon lord who ended up getting a mind brew, feeding it sleeping potions to keep it dormant and isolated, ended up capturing a bunch of people and then letting them go. And essentially, one mind brood, as we learn throughout the story, is very potentially detrimental. And this is the only like time hop, not time hop. It's just kind of backstory stuff. Anyway, so he ends up infecting a bunch of people, giving them sleeping potions. They don't think much of it. They think, oh, well, he just didn't want to kill them, didn't want them fighting, whatever. And then they all start hatching. And it's just absolute freaking chaos. And he pretty much topples a whole empire, so to speak, with this. So that's why the Light or Inquisitors have a scorched earth policy, no holds barred. If anyone is potentially involved, infected, gives me a funny look, talks to my sister, whatever, they are going to get destroyed. So Kessa sets things up so that she will protect her friend, and then Edward figures out through the warping slash bending, bend but don't break objectivity loophole. He says, I will make a pact with you and not anyone who thinks it's you, not any other entity pretending to be you. And essentially, we believe he has found a way around the brood stuff, of which is why everything works out in the end, because Galio is supposed to protect these people, is currently the sheriff. And due to him buying a talent, which lets him see if people are telling the truth, which he purchased with his own XP, which was not a gift of the light, much like his sunbeam, we may or may not be having connectivity issues. Or never mind, we're good. Just a little blip,
Okay.
stuff and things. And yeah, so we get to see Rion again, where he's just like, kill him, we're done with it. And then we get to see Kessa kind of give him flack back, where she's like, hey, I taught you how to do this.
Right.
You know,
Which again just shows like what an OP minion he has now.
oh,
And just her combat
it doesn't even
prowess.
show it yet, but it does.
We
Or
get a tease.
we get a tease when he's looking at his dungeon stat stuff, and his like
Mm,
threat levels up to like 45, and his like number or defense rating or whatever just like skyrockets after adding Kessa.
oh yeah.
All right, so
Yeah.
we get a tease there.
We get a
Anyway,
tease.
so we're meeting with Galio and Rion, and we've got Kessa with us. He, or I forget who it is that's like, hey, so while you guys are yelling at each other, there's smoke and fire, and things are
I'm
getting
pretty sure it was
crazy.
Kess. Yeah, where she looks over and the whole village is pretty much made of wood, and we start to see flames.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess before or during all of this, we get to see the mind brood little girl kill her father. And it is very graphically done. It is very well
Yes.
done. And so, yeah,
But
yeah,
it brings home what all these people go through, right? Because
yeah,
that's this big overarching theme to the book is what is the right decision here? Um, Edward, who is a dungeon lord, servant of the dark, evil, etc., is going to Galileo and saying, "Hey, I can figure out if they're infected with a mind brood or not. We can save them. We don't have to put this all to the torch." And he, an ex-servant of the light, is like, "No, that is what we need to do, and this is the reason." And we get those glimpses through the little girl becoming a mind brood, and you see just the severity of what they go through. This little girl essentially eats her whole family, and then you get the graphic details of her eating her father and a little glimpse into just kind of like the stats that he's no peon, right? Like he's been a worker all his life, physical manual labor, high endurance, high stats, strong guy. I think at one point talks about how like he can hurt something at like so far a distance away, just throw a rock, kind of like, I don't know, entry level fighter, I guess. Anyway, it's graphic and it just shows how serious this is if it gets out and why they have the scorcher of policy, right? Went on a bit of a rant there. But are we having connectivity issues?
yeah. I, it was my fault. I adjusted a couple settings. Yeah, I'm getting buffering issues. We might have mic issues. Please bear with us. Um, it might just be on my end. Anyway, it's up. It's just might have a couple blips throughout it, and I forgot to revert the audio quality after switching
Mm,
profiles. So
bear with
I
us,
keep, yeah, I
everybody.
keep
If
getting
it's
an
too
error.
bad, let us know in the chat. We'll try to address it. Otherwise, let's keep
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
marching on.
We're good.
We're leading up to the best part, the final conflict, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mind Brood is loose in the capital.
Yep. Things are
Ready?
burning. Edward does his sorry, not sorry, hey, I'm here, hey, I'm not, pulls a drone out of thin air. Due to his spawn cap, one disappears. He's now signaled to his minions back at the haunt that something's gone south. Hopefully, the big smoke smoldering city is kind of a obvious marker.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody takes off. We we get another insight into how nub ish he is. Everybody else is like leagues ahead of him, and he's like huffing and puffing and trying to get there. Which,
Yeah.
yet again, as simplistic as that is, because it's just information, it leads into the walls are locked, the guards are
Yes.
dead, and everybody else just like addresses it, jumps over the wall, whatever. He pulls his drone and he eats through the wall. We get inside, and yeah, yeah, yeah. Big, major stuff here. So the spiders can smell the mind brood. They're not
Mm-hmm.
going to let this get any further out of hand than it needs to be. They start rounding up people. Um,
And there's kind of like some ancestral memories on both sides between the spiders and the mind broods, and there's a history there. They've been at war, quote unquote, for generations, right?
Yeah, and that's something I really appreciated. It's something we as humans forget, but is just a great writing tactic or technique where the spiders have this, I guess, divine dungeon memory stone thing where they can devour their queen and grant and gain its memories. So that's kind of
Hmm.
cool. But then, yeah. It's also this simple like spiders eat flies, they spin webs. Due to this, they have natural enemies, basic stuff. Anyway, so
It gives us
spiders,
some of the lore from the larger world, though, right?
yeah,
Again,
yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
teasing into the bigger picture of this universe that we're coming to play in.
Yep. And so the spiders are rounding up people. Um, Edward has finally made it there, eaten through the wall. We kind of lose track of the other people. I'm trying to remember exactly how this plays out.
Hmm.
Because so,
I mean, Edward gets to the town, and we start off from his point of view, right?
yeah.
And we start to see the spiders. We see things crashing and burning in flames. Um, Spiders wandering around.
Or so,
He goes and he armors up
okay, yeah,
from
yeah.
the barracks, which is good for him because he's pretty much been in scrub gear from the get-go. And now he gets like some leather bracers, a sword that he really doesn't quite understand how to use yet. Um, Trying to
So
think.
the thing that I was done really well, and I was trying to put it chronologically, he essentially builds a dungeon underneath. And I forget
Mhm.
where exactly chronologically it happens, but this is the application of power that was just done so beautifully. Well
Yes,
done.
yes.
Well done. And
I think
so
it's
he's building this dungeon underground, A, to put out the fires. That way the whole town doesn't burn, because it's kind of like if you starve the fire source of fuel to burn, by bringing it underground, plus by smothering it and stealing its oxygen, it stops. So he's trying to save the town by putting out the fires. Double-edged sword. Look at me now, utilizing those for resources to make spikes at the bottom of pits, which then he ends up trapping spiders. And
hmm hmm
yet again, I'm out of order, but then he has the battle with the queen where he couldn't beat her toe to toe. He is a level
pure
one nobody,
application of stats and power doesn't stand a chance.
and he ends
But
up saving the people, which then she realizes, she gets all ticked off, and then he very much tunnel and funnel, pulls her back, draws aggro,
mhm,
and we get to see, everybody initially, pause because we don't want to fight on his terms in his zone.
right.
And yeah, and then she forces others to do it, and they die due to the spikes or whatever. And then we get the
It's so
obscene,
beautifully written there
yeah,
too, because it leads into it and then you switch over to the spider's perspective, right? And she sends the little peon spiders, the little guys, and then she sends the warriors like don't question me, and there's just nothing, right?
yeah,
And so the big bad queen, she gets pretty much outsmarted, right? Falls onto the traps, and then he uses his improved reflexes, right, to finish her.
yeah, and that's where she's in the aggro. Yeah, that's what it is. That's where it gave me the lit RPG feels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
So,
yeah, so yeah, it's done great because it doesn't really like explain it all. It's not so data dumpy, but these things happen and we get to see him kind of work through the process and figure it out. The spiders are trying to starve the mind brood by taking everyone captive, and
mm-hmm.
then he's able to just swoop in and pick them up from underneath with his drones and creating a dungeon. He's also able
Mm-hmm.
to take out the towers to stop them from burning. which, from the spider's perspective, they're like, I don't know how these human structures work. Like, who even knows? Which I got a kick out of. And then we get to see, I okay, so then we pact with the new queen or the other
Mhm.
spider who is a princess who's going to become the queen. Um,
Yes.
Pretty much says, "Hey, I've got a pact with you because if I don't," and we get to see this earlier with the prior queen after the battle. She's moved this way because she smells the mind brood and she needs to take it out, but she's also
Right.
lost a lot of her forces, having to move and fight on several fronts and blah blah
Mhm.
blah. New queen is more so understanding, realizes that with her smaller, she needs to rebuild. But if she just stays
She
as a
needs
regular
time.
queen, she's going to be steamrolled by the rest of them. And
Yes.
so she
Yes.
packs and she can smell them, which so now we've got the two fronts. We've got the dungeon pact or the minion pact where he can say, "Hey, I'm not going to be with a mind brood," and then we've got the spiders who have the ancestral racial uh, disagreement there. So we've got two fronts that we can detect them,
Mhm.
and then we run into Alder and Levy, and they're pretty
No,
much
no, no.
like,
We run into Levi and Kess.
"Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
We
yeah."
don't get to Alder until later. Um, but yeah, continue.
So we run into Alder and Kess
No,
of
no, no.
or yeah,
Kess and Levi. We run into Kess and Levi
yeah, okay.
because Alder.
Yeah, so we run into them and Edward kinda paints the picture and lays it out as to how he figured it out. And yet
Mhm.
again, beautifully done because it doesn't come out and say it. We had little hints of, Ione wanting to shove Galileo off the top of the
Mhm.
um uh anyway, push him off because that's how he feels, and you get that remorse of, oh, this isn't the wild, this is civilization. He's always disliked Edward. He's always trying to just kill him right then and there. And then we end up running into our minions, and
Mhm.
Edward explains he was there throughout all of it. He
Yes.
was there when they fought the spider and he was revealed. He has all the information. He was there when Hess and Edward and Galileo were meeting initially. He was there for all these other things. And if Kess, because we met up with
This
her,
this book
they,
does that well though, real quick. It does enough of the foreshadowing that when you get there and it all clicks in place, it makes sense, right?
yeah,
I felt like Hugo Hesco did a good job just giving you just enough that if you're really in tune, you could kind of get there on your own, but it's not straight up, hey, this is what's going down,
yeah.
right? So, so well done. You were saying he pretty much paints the picture for both of them, process of
Yeah.
elimination.
How we figured out
Um,
Rion is the one who brought
mhm,
the mind brood is,
mhm,
why would he accept or care about dungeon minions because he knows unless there's ulterior motives and or he's the one who brought the mind brood. Um, then we get to find Rion, or well, we get a couple people having battles with spiders, and we're like, wait, hold up, nope, they're with me.
yep, yep.
And so we've now got everyone on the same side. Um,
Kind of in the mix of that too, which is an important part. Um, we get Renew Your Vows, right? By Galileo with his Lady of Light.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Gets
because we get the
gets his
spider
sunburst
who's pretty
back.
much like, "Hey, we're on your side now. We have a
Hmm.
pact." And Galio's like, "I am only on the side of the light."
Yep, yep.
Kamehameha. Just kidding. Sunbeam.
Yep, yep.
And
Kamehameha Sunbeam.
we get a little bit of that forward backwards moment where Edward sees it, but he asks the spider he's with, and she's like, "Well, I'm only so many winters old. Go ask the queen. Doesn't have time." Anyway,
Mhm.
foreshadowing for more information later. Um, Galio has now been reaccepted by the light. We are now having a. Then we get to the showdown with Rion, who has a knife the neck of Alder. That's why we didn't see him
There you
before.
go.
With Alder, it throws me off because most of the story it's Alder and Levi, and then
It's true.
yeah,
It's true. Yeah, they're always together, except when Alder's busy about to get a second smile.
yeah, and so but that scene is played out very well as well because we've got Edward trying to do his drone under the ground stuff. Rion straight up calls him out, says, "Hey, I know about it." And then he's got his improved reflex chance.
Hmm.
And, everybody always forgets about Kleck. And Kleck
Everybody always forgets
comes
about Clegg.
back and gets his MVP moment. And then on top of all this other chaos going on and going about, we get the Mind Brood who gets her revenge
That
because
whole combat scene, though, leading up to that was just great, right? Again, you talk about application of power and how only through him taking advantage of the drones and trying to stay a step ahead strategically and being self-aware of just the hole in the ground, the spiders, um, the timing of these attacks, they're able to go toe to toe with this top level ranger, right?
yeah,
And thank goodness for Kess, who just straight up lucks on her side to flex an arrow. Um, WTF, and then having the drones and everything pop up right when they need to pop up. Um, it reminds me of not exactly, but just like WoW when like throwing a sheep or something. Polymorph,
yeah,
get a sheep in the way. Anyway, and then yeah, the Mind Brood.
is able to take out Rion. And the feels there because the way this dark fantasy paints a picture of this little girl not wanting to kill her father, but having these hungers and urges to do
Hmm.
these things and not understanding why and how into, all this. And it's then as she kills Rion, you get to see the feelings and we get to see, kind of the Levy talk about how she is,
She doesn't
she's
understand,
suffering
right?
because she's too
Yeah.
young to understand. And yeah, then we get to see Edward yet again tanking, which he's not a frontline character. He's not the best with stats, and we chew him out later for it, but get freaking Edward. Now Rion's dead. We get Edward to approach her, and this is that double-sided, like real world versus game world thing. We end up
Hmm.
at the end of the conflict. We end up finding out that we had a drone attached to the skull or the brain because the brain's now exposed. Because yeah, that thing. Um, get the drone to
So the
attach to
drone
the
attaches.
brain, of which in his world they realize that it doesn't have nerve endings or whatever. So anyway,
Mm,
he takes a big gamble. He very much plays on the, young scared girl and knows that also it is a mind brood and it knows and can read stats and blah blah blah, and that he's the weak link and he's the weakest character there. And yeah,
pulling a Kleck move of his own,
yeah,
right?
pulls that.
Under yeah. He's a low level. He's a fishy, really low on XP. Um, the book just moves so fast. It,
I
it had a lot of good stuff.
I think it's more that it's short. But okay,
Yeah,
but both,
you're
both,
right. You're right. It
depending
is
on the
short.
light you look at.
It got a lot done though,
Yeah,
in as short as it is. And I feel it does a good job kind of introducing us to the world. Um, Before we go too far down that rabbit hole, the big conflict with Galio. at the end there. Oh, you remember the feels the first time?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
And
we've
I
been
think even if you didn't get the fields, freaking Alder kind of repaints it for everybody.
yes,
Because
yes.
like I kind of got it and I understood it because the whole thing about me thinking Galileo is the light, but then he's been rejected and now he's neutral. Edward is
Hmm.
the dark, but he's trying to Faust the hell out of it and become a neutral and or a good. The way the mind brewed it. Anyway. So the feels about that final conversation with Galileo.
Let's set the picture.
Okay,
So we've had the big conflict up until now, right? Like the whole risk with the mind brood is the scorch earth policy, right? From the light. And even Kesk does a nice job kind of articulating this like, oh, are you just going to be a slave to the light, right? Like you're responsible for these people. He was the sheriff first, and then he was an ex inquisitor, very much in the lawful good mindset. And the Inquisition's position is if there is any contact with COVID-19, you just, I mean, the mind brood, you have to scorch everything because it's highly contagious. The mind brood's not quite airborne, but it feeds, it lays eggs. The magic is expensive, hard to do. There's no way to tell. They just are going to burn this village, right? And the mind brood was too young. That was part of Ion's big conspiracy, right? He gave it to a little girl because it would take a lot longer to grow and be able to reproduce. So that's why he fed the special candy slash mind brood to the little girl.
I didn't
Um,
realize that was what that was until I reread it when she's talking
yes,
about him coming through and giving her candies and not to share with her brothers.
yes.
Anyway, it was
So
beautifully
at
done.
this point, our little dungeon lord who came in with a walking stick, shirtless, now has, the witch, the bard,
The
Kess,
Batland
the Batlin, the whole Batlin tribe now, the
spiders,
spiders
yeah,
under his reign. He's turned uh, the area he's responsible. He's the sheriff of this area. He now has a dungeon underneath the whole place, being called Lord Wraith. And Galileo walks up and he's able to see that he's telling the truth, right? Because of that personal skill. So as this evil dungeon lord spins this huge story about how, the mind brood was too young to lay eggs.
or sorry,
I
how
will
Rion.
yeah. Ione did all that stuff and how he was trying to manipulate him into a war, and just I really got a kick out of when Edward talks about how um, here he is in a whole other world and somebody's politics can drive them to do such crazy and unthinkable things. Where again, scorch earth policy. So we get to this point. Dungeon Lord faces um, the Lady of Light has welcomed me back in. I now have the Kamehameha power, sunbeam again, and oh, the tension
Yep,
going in. I'll be the judge. We don't have to fight. The Dungeon Lord has all the people captured and all the tension leading up, and he asks Galileo, well, what does your lady tell you to do? And it's pretty much along the lines of like my duty, right? That I do my duty. And Ed's just like, oh, okay, yeah, go do it then. And it's just like,
yeah. It paints
oh,
it so well,
oh,
and then
that
you
emotional
get
roller coaster.
for anyone who didn't pick it up, then you get Alder pretty much being like, "What? What just happened?" And then they paint it out, and it's like, well, he's been accepted by the light, but he's not been reinstated as an Inquisitor, so he has a loophole saying do his duty, which is be a sheriff and to protect the people of his town. So,
Hmm.
due to Edward being able to act and figure out stuff, but that doesn't matter because we are able to utilize his other minion, the spiders, to sniff him out. And yeah, so we know everything's clear. And then he talks about other strategies and what he's going to do and how he's going to take them, not take them, and distribute them elsewhere so they can say they weren't here, so that Galileo can still do his job and report it,
Yes.
and blah blah blah,
Yes.
and just the whole like,
They spin this fiction between them.
yeah,
Like in the black and white binary world, they are enemies, right? He is now a servant of the light, and Edward is a servant of the dark.
yep.
Like if you break it down to just the basics of the basics, and here they are conspiring with each other to save the lives of these villagers. They've both fought on the same side together, they fought against each other. They're not allies, but they're conspiring together to essentially make him the bad guy, right? It was the dungeon lord that did this.
Or no,
Um,
I thought they were trying to make Rion the bad guy. Or no, no, no.
I
I'm sorry. That the true story was Rion's the bad guy. The altered interpretation, reiteration is Edward's the bad
Yeah,
guy. Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Edward's
yeah.
the bad guy, and they died in the line of duty trying to protect him. And that's pretty much how they spin the fiction to save the village, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And so I think that's like the end scene of the actual book, and then we get the epilogue where Haran, the boatman, comes back, and we get to see him visit.
Hmm.
And man, you thought you were doing good. You thought you had things together, and it turns out that there's a bigger overarching plan all along. And even though you destroyed what is a neutral entity, the Mind Brood or Sephar's Bane, and whatever, whatever, Iran just kind of lays it out, and he's like, "Yeah, we did our part. We got Galileo back into the light. You defeated the Mind Brood because you wanted to, and that's something you enjoy. Like this was all part of our plan." And it's just
You're
like,
dancing to our
what?
beat all along, all along. See, you have free will, you have free choice. You could do whatever you want with these powers we gave you. Oh, good job. Thanks for doing our work. Here, let me give you another gift,
And that's one
another
thing.
blessing of the dark.
Oh yeah, he does get that final power right at the end.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's
Murmur's Reach,
yeah, I think you're right. I think it's Murmur's Reach.
which they don't
So,
tell us about, but they hint
mhm.
at and whatnot.
Yes. Yes. And yes. Started from the bottom, now we're here. I enjoy the fact that while it's not super heavy on the lit RPG components, they include the stats for you. So you can kind of see where they're at. And you do get a stat update when he uses his abilities to, I think it's like his dungeon's mantle or whatnot, which is kind of like his assess or inspect skill.
Or yeah, you get kind of two. One, his evil eye, and then two, the dungeon stats.
Yes, yes, yes. And yeah.
We never find out in book one how everybody else can read stats because we get that interaction with Galileo when they're first trying to party up and go out for the spiders, and he's pretty much like reading off Edward's stats, and he has that panic moment, but looks over at Alder and Levy, and they're not worried, and he's like, "How do they do that?" The whole time they're like, how do they do that?" And the only way he can
Yeah.
do it is doing that skull glowy green eye, you know,
Mm-hmm.
evil eye
Levy's
bit.
Levy's favorite.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's a scrub. He's a fishy,
Yeah.
new
A
to the world.
lot of potential though.
Um, I really enjoy in the book how like it talks about how he's a programmer, and you see him kind of use programming logic as he plays with objectivity. That's kind of an overarching theme that you get to follow a little bit more in the later books. Um,
Yeah, he does it well because pretty much the first time he does the specialty minion pack with the
mhm,
Batlins, Lady
mhm,
chews him
mhm.
out, and she's like, "You can't do that." And he lays it out from his perspective, like, if this wasn't designed to protect me and my people, like, why would it be set up like that? Why wouldn't it be a default
Yes,
or generic thing? And then
yes.
he lays it all out, and it makes sense from that perspective. Uh, can't say more. Yeah.
Oh, no spoilers, no spoilers. Um, so kind of moving into final thoughts, and then I have a couple other overarching questions. I really enjoy the fact that Edward is not overpowered. That's something I get tired of seeing in all genres. He makes mistakes, he learns and grows, he's far from perfect. Um, he's very relatable, right?
Yeah,
I feel,
I enjoy those that start from one or start from zero.
yes, yes. Um, the world building, we've broken it down. I feel like it's a great introduction to the series. The scaling only picks up from here moving forward. I believe he's been pretty consistent about releasing a book every 6 months. So we're due for another one here soon-ish. I think August is when they said book five, if he keeps to his current schedule. So you guys have some time to get current. Um, yeah. I don't know if we fully touched on this, Pete, but would you consider this a book that you'd recommend to beginners if they want to get into lit RPG or not?
So it depends on their background. Like if you come from more of a D&D tabletop programming whatever background, I would say yes because it does give a very roll of the dice feel. But if you come from
I
more of
like how it
a
went D&D tabletop programming.
it's kind of back and forth.
Continue.
Anyway, if you come from more of a like MMO, I guess console gamer, whatever, I would say
Mm.
no because it doesn't. For me, for those people, I enjoy a lot more. Like we upgraded our gear, but it wasn't a very ooh shiny moment. Where for from my MMO experience, I enjoy a lot more of that shiny epic gear upgrade stuff.
Hmm.
So by far the easiest one for anyone, any genre background they come from, getting into lit RPG, I would have to say The Land, which we mentioned a little bit earlier, but The
We're going to have
Land,
to cover that on our channel now.
yes, and there are a couple lines of thought with that. It is already so long that doing it book by book would take forever, and or we would have
Yes.
to double slash quadruple our output. And
We could do 2 months at this rate.
I'm about to re-enter the real world and try not to die. So for anyone and everyone, The Land is a good lit RPG entry book. This book I enjoy. It's not super heavy on the lit RPG aspects, but definitely so.
You made a lot of good points, and I agree with all of it. It is a good book. I really enjoy the series. Highly recommend it. If you are not looking for a lot of the quote unquote like heavy lit RPG theme
Or no
and
data dump.
stats
Yeah.
and no data dump and like the game mechanics behind it and everything you said, like for me it much more felt like a D&D clone, trapped in a video game feel. Like the trapped in the video game, the EXP, the stats, that's there for the quote lit RPG um, theme genre. But if I was looking for something to really scratch my lit RPG itch, where I want the ooh shiny, the stats upgrades, the um, video game mechanics, however that may be, whether it be settlement building, whether it be stat grind, whether it be, ranking stuff up. This book isn't it. It's good. It's a great dark fantasy story. I still consider it lit RPG, but it doesn't scratch that itch for me. The land really owns those aspects of it. Ascend Online, same thing. I really consider it in the same vein there.
Yeah, and I guess
Uh,
that's a side note. I enjoy epic, long-winded fantasies, so that's the land. If you want something short and sweet, this is shorter, but it's not super lit-esque. So I would have
mhm,
said Ascend is my other
mhm,
alternative.
yes.
Ascend is really well. One and two, two is really a 1.5, so I guess that doesn't count. But one and three and or two is where I'd go. Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Anyway,
okay.
wrap. Yeah.
Yeah. Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. We are going to be ironing out our June, right? That's the next month.
I believe so. I don't
June.
know. It's 2020. They might change that
Yeah, they
too. It
might
might not
skip
be
it.
June.
Oh man, there was a meme I saw where it's freaking December 31st, 11:59, and it's about to roll over to 2021, and it
Yeah.
rolls and it just goes to 12, or it goes to 13/12/2020, and it's like you're not done yet. You're
I
still stuck.
I
Anyway,
got one even
we're
better. Hold on, hold
okay.
on. Luke Chimilenko, author of Ascend Online, known for his fire memes, posted something where it was pretty much along the lines. You remember this minor spoilers for um, Completionist Chronicles. Now's your chance, but it's pretty much like, oh, up until now's congratulations on completing the tutorial part of
Oh yeah.
2020. Now, now the real game is going to begin, as if what was it, Killer Hornets, Plague, everything else.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't
That's
bad
it's just a
enough.
tutorial. So we're trying to iron out our June Geek Out schedule, TBR. Would love to get some feedback.
Might
We
continue the series.
might continue this series. There's a number of other series we've talked about continuing. We need to work out details about having a good system set up on if we're just going to do maybe a poll on Twitter and or in our Discord
Discord, yeah.
server, and maybe do like one Geek on My Sleeve community pick um, per the month, something like that. But prior to that,
And tune
next
in
Sunday,
next time. Next Sunday, The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. So, yeah, Sunday, Way of Shadows, Brent Weeks. This is a first read for us. I've been listening to it, and honestly, like my life has been kind of
it's been a hectic week.
hectic. So normally I can listen to something and multitask well. For this one, and it being for the first read, being for the chaos of life, being for listening and doing other things, I had a hard time following it. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it so far, not to say that it isn't good, but I'm gonna need to dive in a little deeper.
Mm,
It has a very subtle, unique, dark assassin feel, and for the first book, it seems very world buildy
hmm
and kind of teasy. Like it just teases about a lot of the magic or whatever, which is what I
yeah.
really enjoy because I'm gonna be honest, real world kind of sucks. Um,
Uh,
but yeah, so I can't really give a great descriptor of it. The Way of Shadows is next Sunday. I'm
We just haven't figured out the rules of objectivity yet.
yeah.
As soon as we do, and we pick cultivation, we can just cast our daily spells, and it'll all be good. If that's how you're going to roll, I don't know. We didn't really get to talk too much about how you would roll your dungeon lord if you assumed the mantle and made a pact with the boatman.
Well, that's all I think subject to whoever it is, because when Edward gets the ability to buy spells, Levi kind of is like, oh yeah, it's nice just to be able to cast spells and not have to study for years on end to get it. Which I don't know if
Hmm.
that's all Dungeon Lords or how you can spec or whatever. Anyway, Edward ends up kind of like spell sword esque, but they don't say it. Which
Yeah, yeah. Fun times, fun times. Anything else for the crowd?
uh
Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Sunday. Our release schedule should stay fairly similar. We are going to still do Sunday regardless. I will be re entering the world and hope not to die.
Be
So
safe.
other releases might be delayed. Yeah, we'll see.
Life happens. Plan to be here every Sunday. Weekly schedule may fluctuate a bit, but hope to still get out 2 to 3 videos a week. And yeah, Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Bye.
Bye.